Greetings to all the students. Welcome to the YouTube channel of nextias, and you are watching Daily News Decoded, an initiative of the nextias where we discuss major important articles published in the newspapers The Hindu and the Indian Express. With the help of the today's video, we will be going to discuss reciprocal tariff, a very important and burning aspect. Second, G7 issues, Chief Election Commissioner, National Games and Olympics 2036 bid by India, and yes, the NOTA. So now let's start with the very first major topic of today's class is Trump's reciprocal tariff, which is visible over your screen. Most of the students must be thinking that India-USA engagement was majorly related to the defense import or the other energy-based deals, but no. The biggest deal that they have, or not the deal I would say, but the biggest issue that is at the word is the reciprocal tariff, which is being covered with the help of this today's video. So the topic for say first previous question papers for say UPSC has asked certain questions based on the trims and the issues associated with the tariffs part of thing. Right now, the point is, what is a reciprocal tariff? So in very general and a very layman term, imagine tariffs are just the taxes imposed on goods imported from another country. For example, if USA or any USA citizen wants to import a Banarsi sari from India, at that particular moment, at the import of Banarsi sari, if USA imposes certain tariffs, just to counter, to make sure that the prices will be higher, right? So this is this reciprocal tariff. This is the tariff part. Why reciprocal? Reciprocal means, as per the Trump's statement, for say, if India on the import of the textile part imposes 2% of the tariff, then the USA will be imposing the very same percent of 2% of the tariff. So for say, in case of importing or buying the Banarsi sari from India, at the time of importing the Banarsi sari to the USA just for this reciprocal tariff policy will impose 2% of the tariff. This is reciprocal tariff. Now, tariff indicates that would impose tariff taxes similar to what other countries are levying. The example I just said told you. In principle, now this is very important thing. In principle, implementing a reciprocal tariff plan means that USA charges a range of different import tariffs on same goods linked to tariff change on same good in a trading partner. Why the point this point is trying to convey that there not be a uniform tariff or reciprocal tariff. For say the textile, India might the reciprocal tariff against the import of India's goods will be 2%, but against of USA or against of EU it would be, or against of China or any other country could be 4% on a very same good. For say sari, the textile sari. This is the part. And why this thing is been in our domain? Because reason thinking, if imposing tariff, right? Imposing tariff will mean that the cost will be higher. The cost will be higher. And if the cost will be higher, that means if the cost will be higher, that means the person living in the USA needs to buy is costly. That means in near future it might definitely increase the inflation in USA. And on the same hand, because it will become costly for the country that is exporting to the USA. In case of India, अगर भारत उस सारी को अमेरिका को भेज रहा है, in that particular incident, if USA imposes a tariff, so there will be a chances of inflation to take place in USA. But from India, because the export will become higher or costly, I would say, the export become costly. अगर मैं भारत के परिप्रेक्ष्य में बात करूं, तो अगर भारत बनारसी साड़ी को भेज रहा है, and after the movement they got to know that because of the tariff imposed, the cost of Banarsi sari has got enhanced, and that is why it will definitely it will definitely have a chink on supply chain, right? तो जब सप्लाई चेन और डिमांड के ऊपर बात आएगी तो भारत के लिए there might be a scenario that the slowdown will take place in the supply chain or in India, right? This is this aspect why reciprocal tariff is in a very burning topic nowadays. Now just understand a very little bit of historical understanding. For say in past, majorly I would say after World War II, the world moved towards more and more free trade in goods because of the consensus of thinking free trade as mutually beneficial. Why? Because उन लोग, see, the countries after the Second World War, they wanted a better free flow of the movement so that all the countries involved in the trade will get benefited, right? But there were certain caveats. For say, if we take certain definitions of the GATT or World Trade Organization, they ask for special and differential treatment in favor of the developing countries. The developing countries says that historically it was the developed country who had gained advantage, but now because to safeguard my consumer, because to safeguard my my losing manufacturing industry, my farm economy, I need to safeguard it. That is why I need a special and a differential treatment that has been asked from the side of developing countries always. Now why this point is because this has internal strength, very same point that we have just mentioned. Then why did they ask for the special and the differential treatment? Because the internal strength. For say there was no robust manufacturing aspect, there was no farm mechanization, there was no very robust farm economy in a developing country. So just to safeguard the economy of the the livelihood of the farmers, for say with respect to India, जहाँ पे 86% से ज़्यादा farmers, they are the small and the marginal farmers, right? To safeguard the farmers' condition from the from the influx of the agriculture products, countries like India wanted a special and differential treatment. That means reduction in the tariff or imposing higher tariffs for the same good if coming to India from Indian side, right? That is why developed countries were expected to have lower tariff than tariffs in developing countries, the point we just mentioned. Now move ahead. Now go with what will be the outcome in with respect to the data. For say India will have 29% increase in the tariffs if reciprocal tariff as initiated by the USA, that in the onwards 2nd of April they will complete the tariff that needed to be imposed upon different countries, right? So yeah, there might be a scenario that after 2nd of April 29% increase in tariff in India, Brazil 28% will see the biggest tariff hikes. Other countries like European Union, UK, Mexico, Canada will follow 19% to 25%, right? But as I quoted, USA inflation could rise to 4% due to higher import cost. The inflation in USA will be higher for sure, right? So ultimately, if we look this point, that imposing a reciprocal tariff at this moment is definitely not a win-win situation for any of the country. Then the point comes, why USA is trying to do at this moment? ऐसा क्या कारण है कि ये इस बात को जानने के बावजूद भी कि ना तो ये यूएस के लिए फायदेमंद है, ना ही दुनिया के लिए, ना ही ग्लोबल सप्लाई चेन के लिए, वो ऐसा कर क्यों रहे हैं? This is the point now. Why reciprocal tariff now? So the first and the foremost point is, for say if I go with the help, not the help, but the statements of the the President Donald Trump, he said that US is being treated unfairly in global trade. उनका कहना है कि यूएस को पूरी दुनिया ने अनफेयरली ट्रेड किया हुआ है इन ग्लोबल ट्रेड. नाउ द पॉइंट इज व्हाई डज ही थिंक सो? सो नाउ टेक इट विद सर्टेन एग्जांपल्स. फॉर से इफ आई टेक दिस एग्जांपल विद रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ इंडिया, जस्ट फॉर एग्जांपल. सो इफ आई टॉक अबाउट द डेटा ऑफ अप्रैल टू दिसंबर 2024, अगर मैं सिर्फ अभी अप्रैल से दिसंबर 2024 तक का डेटा लेता हूं, सो वी नो दैट इंडिया एंड यूएस bilateral trade between India and US were 82.52 billion, right? और ये सारा डेटा पीआईबी का डेटा है, मतलब भारत सरकार ये बात बोल रही है, right? Now try to understand the April to December, bilateral engagement between, or I would say bilateral trade between India and USA is 82.52 billion. Now, out of 82.52 billion, Indian export was 52.89, right, and Indian import, or I would say USA export, was 29.63 billion. That means the trade surplus was in favor of India. Trade surplus was in favor of India, that too 23.26 billion. This is why the current president of USA says that the world is not treating the USA fairly. This is just a data to be understood. The why is he quoting things like this? And this is not only limited with the aspect of this India aspect, right? If you go with other aspect, for say competition with China. So again, our data says, for say historically, not historically, but in in the last decade, I would say, sorry, in the last year. So last year ka data ye hai for say 2024, right? The USA had witnessed a deficit of, or I say the trade deficit of around $1 trillion US. $1 trillion US. Comparing to the countering, or comparing to its counter China, which has witnessed a trade surplus, that to more than $1 trillion US. That means the US competition with China and the trade deficit are those specific reasons because of which Donald Trump has been quoting that I will impose reciprocal tariff, right? Understood? Now there is another point as well. If we limit our understanding with respect to the reciprocal tariff only with India or Brazil or China kind of countries, no, this is not the right understanding. As per the USA's news, or I would say the newspapers, the major concern of Donald Trump was limited to countries like Mexico and Canada, and now EU especially. Why so? Why Mexico and Canada? Because of two major things. The first thing was that illegal migration is taking place. And the very second point is export of drugs into USA. Export of drugs to US. Right? Based on these two reasons, they have been quoting that yes, Donald Trump Sahab itself says that the biggest threat is Canada and Mexico. Then afterwards, this unfair treatment of the US companies by the EU itself. The European Union courts have not been very much fair with the respect to marketing or the manufacturing companies of the USA. This is the words of Donald Trump, the president of USA. Based on this reason, we can witness that yes, these are the reasons because of which now at this moment USA is trying to think towards imposing a reciprocal tariff. Moving ahead. Now, how this reciprocal tariff work? So, tariff it can counterbalance in three ways. First, if a country imposes high tariff on US imports, the US will match those levies on a good from the particular nation. So, the point that I mentioned, 2 on Indian textile, Indian sari, right? In the very same way, USA will impose 2% of reciprocal tariff. Second, non-barrier tariffs. This has been said at this moment that the reciprocal tariff aspect will not only limited to the tariff imbalance, but rather will definitely go beyond non-tariff imbalances for say VAT. VAT is being introduced by the EU against the products of the USA. That is why it has been very much concerned. For say exchange rate policies will be there as well, right? Second, third, sector specific adjustment. For say tariff may apply to individual products, industries as an over rate of the import from a particular country. For instance, this is the instance that we are trying to give. For say, Brazil currently imposes 18% of the tariff on US ethanol imports. But on the other way, the US majorly is been giving 0% interest upon the ethanol import from the Brazil. This is what Donald Trump trying to convey. That you are imposing 18% of the tariff, but I am imposing 0%. So there has to be an equitable measure, right? Or for say, the European Union charges a 10% tariff of vehicle import compared to US 2.5%, prompting Donald Trump to label EU's trade policy as absolutely brutal. Right? This is how it will work. Now, with the help of the data, we can understand this thing more further. How? For say, this chart is talking about simple average and trade weightage average. For say in US, it is 3.3 simple average, but the trade weightage average is 2.2 deficit. Mexico 6.8, 3.9. China, see China 7.53. Now see South Korea 13.4 compared to 8.4. Now see India 17 to 12. Right? Now India, Brazil might be hit hard as reciprocal tariff because the point that we have just mentioned. Now go with this particular data that we have just brought before your domain. Trading partners countries of USA, countries tariff on USA export and USA tariff on countries export. So for say South Korea has been imposing on US export 13.6% of the tariff. In counter to that, USA on the export of South Korea is only imposing 1.9% of the tariff. This is what is scaling trade brutality. And trade brutality in words of Donald Trump. 10.5, India 2.7. We can witness, the range of things. For say Malaysia 1.4, 0.7, again almost 2 times. Right? So this is the reason why which USA at this moment are trying to convey that reciprocal tariff will be conveyed. Although at this moment we are not very much sure that what kind of rates it will be. But sitting at this moment, we may understand what the reciprocal tariff is all about, how it will work, what it impact in India, in what way. Fourth, how India can sustain this kind of tide. Now, why it matters? Right? Again, it expected to have a widespread impact on global trade, particularly on emerging economies such as India. Right? It also could lead to a higher inflation in US and economic slowdown in the affected countries, the point we have just already mentioned. For India, for say which enjoys a trade surplus with the USA, the new policy could higher cost for Indian exporter, particularly in the industries like pharmaceuticals, textiles, information technology, heavily reliant on the US market. One very important thing that need to understand that in 2024, the point I am trying to convey is that why India needs to get less worry compared to the other countries. For say information technology की बात यहाँ हो रही है, right? Now the data says that it was a 300 billion trade surplus in services between USA and India in favor of USA, right? So this is very, very important thing. But now the point is why even India need to understand this thing. Reason being that Donald Trump himself said that India has been just about the highest tariff nation in the world, hard to sell to India because of very, very strong tariffs. Whatever India charges, we will charge them back. Right? Now, so it will definitely put a pressure upon India to lower the tariff or to lower the trade barriers, which could lead to a long-term shifts economic policy. Right? Now the big picture. The big picture is certain, the point of data. Or if I say about this particular point that we just mentioned, that India need to lower its trade barriers, which could lead to long-term shifts in economic policy. One example. Recently, our finance minister quoted that India will lower the taxes imposed on the, the bike segment of the USA, so that the affordability of the US bikes will enhance in India. Why these things are taking place? Because earlier it was known that this kind of tariff system will work. Right? So Indian government at the very earlier pace is taking certain steps to make sure that the trade will be mutual as usual. Now the big picture. India, US, that currently weighed 190 billion, 50 billion surplus in India's favor. Right? This is average. Now a very important thing. India's average tariff rate is around 17%, was the highest among the US trading partners, compared to the USA 3.3% average rate. Under the new policy, tariffs could be adjusted country by country and product by product, meaning Indian goods could face increased duty based on existing disparity. right? But now the other point, one example I gave why India need not to less worry, because the surplus part that I just mentioned. The very second important thing that we need to understand is, listen, there is a global trade research initiative. They provide one example for say that US imposing a 50% of the reciprocal tariff of Indian pistachios, because India does the same, but it could have little impact because India does not export pistachios. Very important thing, right? So one on one wala part will not be applicable over the India. So India could safeguard its own business standards. First thing. Second thing, that 75% of the USA export to India, the average tariff remains below 5%. That means that out of the 100 export from the India to USA, on 75 out of 100, the tariff will remain below only 5% from the side of India. That means the reciprocal tariff will not be applicable to at least 75 of the exported items from India. Very important data, right? One very important data along with that as well. So for say, India faces steep US tariffs on many labor intensive goods such as textiles, garments, footwear, which rates ranging from 15 to 35% of several products. इस बात का मतलब क्या हुआ? The point is that if somehow USA will impose reciprocal tariff upon India, then at the very same time, India will have its chance to say that if you are imposing tariff on me, will I impose tariff upon your part for say this labor intensive part khas तौर से. So again, India can negotiate in a better mode compared to other countries. So India is in a very better place, right? Now the point is, how will it impact the India? First, India's industry ethics for say pharmaceuticals. India is a leading exporter of generic drugs to the USA, and high tariffs could make Indian medicine less competitive in the American market. And this is definitely a very major cause of concern for India. First thing. Second, textile. US is one of the largest buyer of Indian textile and garments. Increased duty could disrupt supply chains and affect Indian manufacturers. Third, information technology, the services sector. India's IT sector depends on USA for business contracts, while services are not directly affected by trade tensions could spill over into tech policy. It is just an assumption that for say at this moment India's relationship with respect to the USA with manufacturing is going very good. But again, it is not in favor of the USA. Then USA will tilt the tide against India with respect to the tech policy as well. Second, as we mentioned, India has a trade surplus of nearby 50 billion with the USA, meaning it export more to America than it import from America. Trump had repeatedly criticized this imbalance. Now, India has already taken steps to ease the tensions, the point we just conveyed. First, reducing tariff on Harley-Davidson motorcycles, a long-standing Trump grievance. Very first thing, the point that I just narrated. Second, dropping retaliatory tariffs on USA almonds, apples, chickpeas, lentils, and walnuts in 2023. Second, third, however, these moves are not enough. Trump's new policy could force India to make deeper concessions or risk losing access to the US market, right? Third, potential retaliation from the side of India. What India can do? First, US agricultural products such as, for say, India could retaliate with counter tariffs. The point we just mentioned. US agricultural products for say such as soybeans and corns. Second, energy export including oil and gas. India is a major buyer of US energy. Trade dispute will definitely disrupt the agreements between the two nations. Third, aerospace defense deals including purchase of Boeing aircraft, military equipment. One very important thing that we need to understand, that India, if there will be an import, that India may broaden its market. For say we have certain examples in previously, when take this as an example, THAAD versus S-400. In 2018, Donald Trump was the president of America. At the very same time, he said that if India will not buy THAAD from America, India will have sanctions. At the very same time, India moved very cautiously and not only bought S-400, but managed its defense relationship with USA as well. This is the very same time that we can do the same. For say, if there is a imposition or the series of imposition of the reciprocal tariff upon the India, India will definitely enlarge its market. For say, rather buying oil from USA, it might go to buy cheap oil from Russia or from other countries. So the diversification that India has been practices, the wait and watch policies, along with the diversification that India has been practices, has been a boon, or I would say win-win condition for the India always. That is why I have been telling that as per my own economic understanding and India's economic management, reciprocal tariff will not be a very major cause of concern from India. And we need to understand again that Donald Trump in this meeting again has said that our Prime Minister has been a very tough negotiator, right? Now, what next? What is the way forward? For say, negotiation and compromise, the point that I was just conveyed, that India need to engage USA to lower tariff on both sides, preventing a full-scale trade war, and perhaps this is one of the reasons our Prime Minister is visiting the USA. Gradual de-escalation. If the US raises duty, India might respond selectively, targeting politically sensitive sectors to push for a better deal. Third, broader trade realignment. If tension persists, India could explore alternative markets to reduce reliance on the US trade, the point I just mentioned. And India has not shown its might in terms of negotiation only once, but in other times as well. First, I remember 2014-15 when USA said that if you buy or if you purchase the oil from Iran, I will import, I will raise your tariffs, I would put you under the sanction. Even that time India managed briefly. India managed both the countries, Iran and USA both. So this is how India has been diplomatically engaging with both the countries and trying to way forward that all things will be dealt accordingly, right? So this has been the part of this discussion of this tariff, or I would say the reciprocal tariff part. Need to see the practice questions, do right at your home, right? And now let's move to the explained topics. Now let's start with the explained topics of today's daily news decoding session. The first article visible over your screen is Kremlin says that G7 has lost a lot of relevance after Trump calls for Russia to be readmitted. On the other side, we have witnessed that Saudi Arabia has been very much optimistic regarding the meeting of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Saudi Arabia. So that is why the G7 again has come into a very larger domain. So now let's start with this topic. The topic says for say G7, this is an intergovernmental organization comprising the world's most advanced economies. It plays a critical role in shaping global economic policies first, security frameworks three, and geopolitical strategies. And how or what it is all about, we'll talk it further. First, let's discuss the evolution of G7, how it got come into the picture. So in 1975, it started as a G6. 6 countries were there: France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK and USA, and Canada joined as a 7th member in 1976. Always remember this thing, this factual understanding is very much important, right? So ultimately the G7 came into the limelight in 1976. Now, Russia joined G7 in 1998, making it G8, and it was suspended in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea, right? Current members are Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, USA and EU as a non-enumerated members, and there are certain fundamental core values of this G7. For say, promotes freedom, democracy and human rights on the global stage. Now, the significance of G7 at this moment. For say, economic policy coordination. First, we need to understand that around G7, around 10% of the population, 10% of the population, of the world population, first thing. Second very important thing, that all the G7 members are members of G20. So that means the say in G7 will be visible in G20 meeting, and it even works as the countries in G7 works as a bridge between G7 and G20, right? So this is this very important aspect that we need to first highlight and we need to understand. Moving further, for say now talk about this economic policy coordination. We know that around 26% of global GDP, 26% of global GDP are coming from the side of G7 countries, right? 26% of global GDP. That means it remains a key driver of financial regulation. Financial regulations, right? This is the first important aspect that drives that why policy coordination is of importance. Second, it even shapes the global trade, the taxation aspect and other things associated. So this is policy coordination. Second is geopolitical stability and influencing. G7 works as a platform which gives certain guidelines or discusses pressing global crisis. Pressing global crisis. For say Russia-Ukraine issue, Israel-Palestinian issue at this moment, China's expansionist policies, etc. are the things which being discussed on the G7 platform. Third, climate change and energy security. For say topics like carbon neutrality, phasing out fossil fuels, renewable energy investment, right? Renewable energy investment. These are the things that comes into the domain of climate change and energy security aspect. Moreover, in this as well, there are certain partnerships for say just energy transition partnership. Partnership supports developing nations into developing the clean energy. So this initiative is of the G7, right? So with the not only with the help of the policies but with the help of certain partnerships, it even helps the developing countries. So now technology and digital governance. For say G7 led global partnership on AI that was developed in 2018. It set the foundation of ethical consideration of AI in global practices. Again, it was an initiative of the G7. First aspect. Second, the Hiroshima AI process. 2023 addresses certain concerns like AI, deep fakes, AI risk, etc. So on the one particular part, they are talking about the guidelines of ethicals, and at the second part, they are even letting us know that there are certain risks and the the things associated which needs to be countered with. So this is this technological and digital governance aspect. Last, and the strengthening democratic alliances. For say club, the very important things that comes to our mind is G7 led a club of democracies. G7 countries position themselves as a club of democracies to counter authoritarian influences in the world, so that fair trade, equalitarian society, different very moral aspects can take place in different countries in different world, right? So this is this aspect of the significance of the G7 at this moment. But now there are certain challenges associated. The first challenge is declining economic dominance. How? So for say earlier the G7 used to have around 60% of the GDP in the world, but now it has only 26% of the GDP compared to the countries like BRICS, which covers around 50% of the GDP. So that is the reason we may say that it is declining economic dominance. The other factor that we may have in our domain is, for say, the rise of certain countries like India and China, right? Definitely weakens the G7 financial leadership or dominance. Other countries, if we bring, for say, Brazil, right? So this is the first challenge that is upon the G7 countries. The second is limited inclusivity. So for say, there are forums like G20, African Union, right? And BRICS, I would say, right? If I compare G7 with these three things, then we must say that G7 lacks the voice of global south. That means lacks the voice of global south, right? This is a very greater challenge. Third, I would say certain emerging countries, for say India, China and Brazil, are not even the members of the G7 at this moment, when the world is trying to become multipolar. So the inclusion of those countries will definitely make sure that the G7 will work more tandem with the democratic principles, right? But this is again, this limited inclusivity is one of the greatest challenge. Third, lack of institutional framework. For say, if I talk about the lack of institutional framework, right, the thing that comes to our mind is, for say, annual leadership rotation. This annual leadership rotation causes the shifts of the priorities concerned by the different concerned country. This is the lack of institutional framework. First thing. Second thing, the very major thing is that with G7 there is no permanent secretariat. There is no permanent secretariat. There is no permanent secretariat which can definitely allow a uniform policies or a different uniformity across the policies, right? So this is one of the very greater challenge with respect to the G7. This is lack of institutional framework. Now at last, internal division. So for say, we know G7 climate declaration 2018. We saw this thing that G7 climate declaration 2018 was one-sidedly rejected by the USA, right? Just to safeguard its own interest. So this shows the internal differences first. Second, there are even the differences among the countries with respect to the China's trade policies, right? So these things shows that there is a internal divisions within the G7, which is definitely has become over the years a greater challenge to deal with. Now, what is importance of G7 for India, or how the relationship between India and G7 can take place? Now we can understand this thing with four different domains. For say, India's increasing participation. For say, India has been invited 11 times so far. 11 times so far to be present in the G7 meetings that showcase the India's global importance in the contemporary part. First thing. Second, for say, we know Japan is one of the member of the G7, but the recent data shows that India is definitely going to outlast or outweigh Japan and trying to become as the third largest global economy. In that particular senses, there is a growing demand for a country like India to become member of the G7, right? So countering Japan will be a major thing that is asking India to become a part of G7. First thing. Now, second is a counterbalance to the China. For say, if I talk about India, China has been recognized as a country which is not respecting the international rulings. Compared to China, India is a country which is strict itself with international with international rulings. With international rulings. This showcases that India can definitely take place of China. First thing, right? Second, India is a democratic country. India is a democratic country, right? Which is definitely a more stable voice for the global south as well. Because India does not promote authoritarian regime. So these two reasons can definitely give India a very robust understanding that yes, a counterbalance to China and India can become a member of G7. Voice of global south, this democratic country point that I just quoted, right? This is this scenario, or this is been with the one example for say G20 2023 was conveyed in India, was convened in India, right? So India has become definitely a very major voice for global south at this moment. Strategic benefits to India, right? For say it gives a chance for diplomatic engagement. So that India can freely talk about its interests, or rather showing us the hard face. India with the help of the negotiations can deal with the middle path and get its things done. So this platform gives this diplomatic engagement to India. So this is the importance of this G7 platform to India as well, right? Now this is the practice questions over your screen. Please practice this, right? Now the other topic, Modi, Shah and Rahul set to meet on Monday to choose the next Chief Election Commissioner. Now, why this topic in news? Because the Rajiv Kumar Sahab, the Chief Election Commissioner of India, is going to be retired on 18th of Feb 2025. And one convention that a new CEC, the Chief Election Commissioner, must be selected before its retirement. This would be the first time that a CEC would be selected under the provision of the new law, that is Chief Election Commissioner and other election commissioners appointment, condition and services and Terms of Office Act 2023. Now the new selection process. Earlier, the presidents used to appoint CECs based on the government's recommendation, based on the panel, right? But now the new law mandates a selection panel. A selection panel of one is Prime Minister, second is Leader of Opposition in Lok Sabha. This point is very important. Third is a Union Minister. Earlier it was the Chief Justice of India, but now this is the Union Minister now comes into the picture. This is of very importance with respect to your prelims examination. Now the roles are about certain information regarding the CEC. It heads the Election Commission of India for ensuring free and fair elections. First thing. Second thing, very important, this tenure is fixed of 6 years, that to the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. Third, removal. Very important thing, the Chief Election Commissioner can be removed from his office in a manner on like the grounds as a judge of Supreme Court, right? Again, on your screen, there is a practice question that you should practice. The next topic is National Games Closing Ceremony. And the article says that National Games Closing Ceremony, India ready to host 2036 Olympics. Now with this topic, there are two things that come to our mind. The first is National Games and the second is the Olympics, right? Now start with the National Games. Uttarakhand hosted the 38th National Games with participants from 28 states and 8 union territories and the Services Sports Control Board. This is of very important point. Nowadays or in earlier we have witnessed that UPSC from the side of sports has asked questions in prelims examination. That is why things like this has become immense important with respect to your prelims examination. Second, this Services Sports Control Board has topped the medal tally for the 5th time in 6 editions with 121 medals. Maharashtra won 198 medals and ranked 2nd due to fewer gold. About 38 National Games. National Games in an Olympic style event where states and UT competes for the medal. And the game's mascot, the Molly, It was inspired by Uttarakhand's state bird, which is the monal. Now again the point Olympic Games, because Olympic Games was in news, right? Now the criteria why we are witnessing, because India aims to host the 2036 Olympics. For say, according to the Olympic Charter, the hosts are chosen 7 years before the event. Very important thing. Again, to be minded, these kind of statements are of great importance with respect to your prelims examination. So, according to Olympic Charter, the hosts are chosen for 7 years before the event. First thing. Second, the host countries submit a letter of interest to the IOC through their national Olympic committees. Bidding sites complete detailed questionnaire which are again evaluated by the IOC. The IOC Evaluation Commission finally conducts inspection of all the proposed venues of the particular country. The IOC session then votes on the final bids and finalizes the host nation. This is the reference question that needs to be practiced. Then afterwards, the last topic, NOTA records lowest percentage share since introduction. None of the above option, NOTA, right? This is itself is a very important topic with respect to the prelims, mains and your personality test aspect. So now what is NOTA? It is an option on electronic voting machine EVM that allows voters to register their discontent with available options on the candidates. That means, for say, in a constituency, 12 members are fighting the election. Apart from the 12 buttons, there will be another button, the red button will be there, which is NOTA. None of the above experience. That means they are giving you a chance to give in your discontent, that you are not very much happy with the candidates fighting, right? Earlier it was said that it is a very much important democratic practices or the right, the tool which will be given in the hands of the people, so that they may give a discontent to the parties, and along, or I would say along or on the line of the percentage of the NOTA, the parties may decide that this is the person to be given the ticket or not. So to impart a very fair, healthy, democratic election processes, the NOTA was introduced in Indian election process. Now, until 2013, Rule 49O of the conduct of election involved filling out a form at the polling station, which means that the secrecy guaranteed to the voter was compromised. Now, after 2013, a civil rights organization PUCL, they moved to the Supreme Court with a petition demanding the inclusion of a NOTA option in the electoral process in India. Supreme Court directed the Election Commission of India to include the NOTA option on the ballot papers and EVMs for election to the Lok Sabha and the respective state assemblies. NOTA was used for the first time in 2013 in assembly states in 5 states, for say Chhattisgarh, Mizoram, Rajasthan, Delhi, Madhya Pradesh, and then later in 2014 general Lok Sabha elections in India, right? So this again is a very important information with respect to your prelims examination. The Supreme Court refused to direct the Election Commission to hold fresh polls if the majority of the electoral exercise the NOTA option while voting. This is of one of the criticism that has been given regarding the NOTA. So for say in India, FT, first part the post system has been practiced. But now for suppose that from this FTPT, in one constituency we have found that a candidate or in a constituency NOTA has outweighed the number of the votes given to the other candidates. For say 60% has been given to the NOTA, but other 40 or kind of thing has been given to other people. In that particular case, there was a voice that the re-election must take place. But Supreme Court rejected it, refused it to direct the Election Commission to hold the fresh polls. A very important aspect, right? By the order of the State Election Commission, NOTA can be declared as a fictional electoral candidate and fresh elections are held if NOTA gets the majority of the votes. So again, this is the power of the State Election Commissions, right? Recent data for the NOTA, the data must be in a domain. For say, in the general election Lok Sabha 2024, the NOTA got 0.99% compared to 1.06% in 2019. If I talk about three past consecutive years NOTA data, so we know that the trend has been declining, right? And it declined directly from 1.08% to 0.99% in 2014. That means in 2014, there was 1.108% of the NOTA, but now this is 0.99% of the votes in form of NOTA in 2024. Now again, this is a reference question to be practiced by you people, right? Keep watching Daily News Decoded. I hope the points that we are trying to convey, the topics that we are trying to convey, and what manner we are trying to convey is being easily understood by you people. I hope and I wish all you people to keep studying, keep watching Daily News Decoded. All the best. Thank you very much.